This is 2022 A-Level Economics MCQ paper discussion. Look at this question 1. It says the central problem of economics is. See that now we all know that the central problem of economics is scarcity. Right. So we just need to go through the provided options and to select the best option which talks about this scarcity. Right. The first one says establishing a fair tax system. This is not the central problem of economics. Second, ensuring a minimum income for each citizen is also not the central problem. But the third one says allocating scarce productive resources to satisfy wants. See, this doesn't directly tell us just scarcity, but it says that the central problem of economics is allocating the scarce resources to satisfy wants. It's much more broader. Anyway, it talks about the scarcity. So this is the answer for this question 1. Fourth one, enacting a set of laws that prevent resources from overuse. No, this is not the problem. So producing goods and services without being wasting resources is also not the central problem of economics. Right. Second one, which of the following would cause an outward or rightward shift in the production possibilities curve? See, this PPC gets shifted to the right side mainly due to 3 reasons. And what are the 3 reasons? The first one is increase in amount of resources. Increase in amount of resources. And the second one is increase in technology, right? Increase in technology. And the third one, increase in productivity, right? If you need, you can take this productivity again under technology as well. But anyway, if you just take it as a separate thing, so due to one of these reasons, the PPC may be shifted to the right side. Okay, look at the first one. An increase in unemployment. See, that's totally wrong. If unemployment increases, the first thing, nothing happens to the PPC. There won't be any shift of the PPC. But the point that is inside the PPC will go further inside because it talks about increase in the prevailing unemployment. Second one, an increase in inflation. See, increase in inflation is not something that we can present using the PPC. And due to inflation, nothing will happen to the curve. There will not be a rightward shift or a leftward shift. Third one, an increase in capital stock. See, capital is one of the resources that we use in the production process. So when capital stocks get increased, the amount of resources get increased, and as a result, PPC shifted to the right side. So that is the answer for this question 2. And the fourth one, a decrease in natural resources. A decrease in natural resources will shift the PPC to the left side, not to the right side. Fifth one, decrease in the number of workers will again shift the PPC to the left side, not to the right. All right, look at this question 3 now. It says production possibility curves can be used. Again, the PPC can be used to illustrate each of the following with the exception. All right, look at the first option, consumer demand. See that now? Now you have finished the entire syllabus. So if you have finished the entire syllabus, now you know that we have a separate curve, we have a separate diagram to present this consumer demand. And we recognize that as the demand curve. So you do not and you can't present the changes or the consumer demand, the given demand using a PPC. The reason we use a separate diagram for that, and the diagram is called as the demand curve. Right. So this is the answer for this question 3. And the second one says potential output. See, this curve represents the potential output, the maximum possible output. So yes, this is something that we can present using the PPC. Economic growth. See, when the economy grows, the potential output increases so that there will be a rightward shift of the PPC. And this is also something that we can present using a PPC. Fourth one, opportunity cost. See, how do we present this opportunity cost? To present the opportunity cost, you can just move one point on the PPC to another point on the PPC. So this movement from point A to point B, and both points must be on the PPC. and that movement represents opportunity cost. If not, simply we say the slope of the curve represents, right? The slope of the curve represents the opportunity cost. Unemployment. See, I showed you how to represent unemployment, right? Maybe if it's just unemployment, you can just plot a point inside the PPC. But like in the second question, if the unemployment increases, you can move this further inside to represent increase in unemployment. So somehow unemployment is something that we can present using the PPC. Right, the fourth one, which of the following characterizes the social market economy? See, then it's about the social market economy. So we have two different types of mixed economic systems mainly. One is this social market economy, the other one is socialist market economy. But this question is from social market economy. And what's the main feature in these social market economies? The main thing is this: these economies have almost all the characteristics in a free market economy, but in addition to that, in these social market economies, the government intervention is really high just to ensure social welfare. So that's what makes this difference between a free market economy from a social market economy. Right, in social market economies they use price mechanism, it's true, but still the government intervenes to the market often just to ensure social welfare. So that's the main characteristic in social market economies. Okay, now look at this first one: private ownership of all resources. See that now this is somewhat true. The reason I told you that in these social market economies, right, we see almost all the characteristics in the free market economic system. But the problem, when they ask you to recognize which of the following characterizes the social market economy, this is not something that is there only in social market economies. This is something common to both free market economies and social market economies. Second one, public ownership of all resources. No, that's irrelevant, ignorable. Absence of a regulatory framework for functioning of the price mechanism. No, it's the total opposite. In social market economies, the government intervention is very high. Right. Fourth one, strong state role in the provision of welfare services, 100% true. And that's why I told you government intervention is really high just to ensure social welfare. And this is the quality, right? The main quality that differentiate a free market economy from a social market economy. Right. Fifth one says using centralized planning to resolve basic economic questions. Now, this is a quality in command economic systems. Right. Now come to this question 5. It says last year 15 million tons of corn were sold for rupees 30,000 per ton. And in this year 15 million tons of corn were sold again rupees 25,000 per ton. Which of the following changes in demand and supply could have caused this outcome? Okay, so no problem. So just look at this diagram. So let's say that this is the previous year situation. So in the previous year, equilibrium price, if not the market price, was rupees 30,000 and the market quantity was 15 million tons. And in this year, what has happened? The quantity is still the same, right? Quantity is still the same, but the price has decreased to 25,000. So the new equilibrium has to be somewhere here, right? It has to be somewhere here. So how do we get the new equilibrium here? Then the supply curve must be something like this, and the demand curve must be something like this. See that now. Based on the new supply curve and based on the new demand curve, right, we get that given output. The equilibrium quantity is still the same, but the market price or the equilibrium price has reduced. And what changes have happened to occur this thing? See, supply has increased, and that's why the supply curve has shifted to the right side. And at the same time, demand has decreased, and that's why the demand curve gets shifted to the left side. And supply has increased, and then demand has decreased. What's the answer? There's a decrease in demand, right? And there's an increase in supply. So answer for this question 5 is the third one. Right, now look at this question 6. There it says, consider that consumer spends his or her entire income on the purchase of two goods X and Y. Okay, let's assume this person earns rupees 10,000. Using this entire income, the person purchases only two goods X and Y. So let's assume that the price of the good X to be, let's say, 2,000, and the price of the good Y to be 1,500. And let's initially assume that the person purchased, we don't know the exact amount that this person purchases, but let's assume that he purchased uh, 2 units of good X, and then let's say 4 units of good Y. So that the total expenditure, right, total expenditure will be simply 4,000 and 6,000. So his entire income is gone, right, 10,000. Right. So this is the initial situation, and let's see what happens now. If consumers income and the prices of good X and Y double, right, both get double, the income and the prices, and other things remain unchanged. Okay, so let me double the income. Earlier he was receiving 10,000, but now he receives 20,000. Even the price get double, price is 4,000, and the new price here is 3,000. And then what happened to his real income? If his nominal income increases, and again, if the prices also get increased from the same ratio, what happens to the real income? Nothing happens. So that the person can still consume 2 units of good X and 4 units of good Y. So let's see how much is the total expenditure, right? Under the new situation, just to purchase good X, his expenditure is 8,000, and his expenditure to purchase good Y is 12,000. So when you get the total of the two, again the total income is gone. See, so nothing has happened because the question clearly tells us that all other factors remain unchanged. It's taste, the prices of other goods, and future expectations with regard to price. Everything else remains constant. Only these two changes happen in the market. What the changes? They income increases and the price increases from the same ratio. And the person can still consume the entire quantity that he was consuming previously. And it's our answer the fifth one, by the same amount of good X and Y as before. So that's the answer. Right. So no point of going through the other options there. Right. Look at the seventh one. Which of the following helps in explaining why the demand curve for an inferior good is downward sloping? Okay. So the simplest answer for this downward slope of the demand curve for this inferior good is the law of demand. Why? Because when price increases, QD decreases, right? When price increases, QD decreases, so that there will be a downward slope in the demand curve even for an inferior good. And they just ask us to recognize a reason for this. And the reason, I mean, the simplest reason is the one that I mentioned, due to the law of demand, right? Law of demand, or maybe we can write due to the negative relationship between P and QD, right? Due to this negative relationship between these two variables, this slopes downwards. හරි දැන් ඔය ආන්සර් එක අපි හිතේ තියාගෙන මේ options ටික බැලුවොත් first one says the income and substitution effect move the quantity demanded in the same direction. Okay, so it's about income effect and the substitution effect. And then even the second one is about the income effect and the substitution effect. So almost all these options, I think all the options must be with regard to the income effect and the substitution effect. Okay, so let's see the situation. Right, imagine that these are inferior goods, right? Inferior goods. And to be honest, there are two different types of inferior goods. I have mentioned this in previous discussions as well. So the first one is this typical inferior good, right? That's the first category, typical inferior goods. And on the other side, we have given goods, right? We have given goods. Both of these are inferior goods. But in the question, I always tell you this, in the question, if they just say that these are inferior goods, they are referring to these typical inferior goods. And if you look at the income effect and the substitution effect for these inferior goods, this is what happens. So let's write substitution effect first. Substitution effect for typical inferior goods is negative. And the substitution effect for given goods is also negative. I just copy paste the same thing. And let me write the other thing now. The income effect, right? Let's look at the income effect. Income effect. Then substitution effect කියලා කියන මොකද? What happens to the quantity demanded when the relative price increases? When the relative price changes, it increases when it increases or decreases. When the relative price increases, consumers move from the considered good to the other goods so that the quantity demanded decreases. The two change in the opposite direction, so that we say it's negative. An income effect, that is also negative. Why? Because these are initially inferior goods. So when the consumer's real income increases, QD decreases. Hence, even this is negative. And it doesn't matter whether the good is a typical inferior good or a given good, still income effect for both goods negative. හැබැයි උතන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ the relative size of the substitution effect and the income effect. When it comes to typical inferior goods, right, the substitution effect is greater than the negative income effect. But in given goods, the substitution effect is smaller compared to the income effect. So in typical inferior goods, substitution effect dominates, so that there will be a negative relationship between P and QD, right? There will be a negative relationship between P and QD. But since income effect dominates the substitution effect when it comes to given goods, there is a positive relationship between P and QD. So somehow this question is from the typical inferior goods. මොකද එහෙම තමයි ඒ කියන්නේ මම කිව්ව එක. If they don't use the word given, they are always referring to typical inferior goods. එහෙනම් typical inferior goods වල, yes, we do get this negative relationship due to the stronger substitution effect relative to the income effect. ඕක තමයි කතන්දර. එහෙනම් ඒක තියෙන්නේ කොතනද? Look at this one. The income and substitution effect move the quantity demanded in the same direction. So let's think about it in this way. Just imagine that as I mentioned here, the price of the good is initially, let's say 100, and the quantity demanded is also 100. Let's assume so. Right. Now imagine that price increases. When price increases, the relative price also increases. Right? When the relative price increases, the considered good becomes relatively expensive, so that the consumers move from the considered good to the substitutes. And as a result, QD decreases. And this is the direction of the substitution effect. When price increases, due to the substitution effect, QD decreases. Now think about the income effect. When price increases, consumers' real income drops. Right? When the real income drops, since this is an inferior good, what happens to the quantity demanded? Quantity demanded should increase because this is an inferior good. එතකොට ඔයා මොකද හිතන අර කියන කතන්දරය ගැන? In the question they have mentioned that income and substitution effect move the quantity demanded in the same direction. See, just look at this one. When the price increases, in both cases price increases. When the price increases, due to the substitution effect, QD decreases, and due to the income effect, QD increases. So you can understand that the first option must be wrong there, right? So this is wrong. And second one, income effect equals the substitution effect. No, I told you, if it is the case of typical inferior goods, substitution effect dominates the income effect. So this is also wrong there. Third one, negative income effect. Okay, income effect is negative, that's true. Dominates the substitution effect. No, this happens only in given goods, not in typical inferior goods. Fourth one says substitution effect dominates the negative income effect. 100% true, and that's what I explained to you earlier. Right. Fifth one says consumer increases the consumption of the good with an increase in income. See, consumer increase the consumption with an increase in income. That happens if the given good is a normal good. But here it says that this is an inferior good, and that's why this is also wrong. So the answer for this question 7 has to be this fourth one. Right. So I hope that you all understand it. Now let's move to this eighth one. But before we move to the eighth one, let me take all these and we'll send to the other side. Right. We don't need these as well. Okay. Now look at the eighth question. What does it say? Assume good X and Y are complements. Okay. So we will take two complementary goods. We have good X and then we have good Y. So what are the examples? අපි කලින් paper එකේ හිතුවා වගේම we will consider these two. We have milkshake and also we have, let's say, pizza. Right. What will be the effect on the equilibrium price and quantity of good X? Okay. So they are asking about the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity of milkshakes if an increase in supply of good Y, if there's an increase in supply of pizza, while other things remain unchanged. Okay, so we will first look at the situation in the market for pizza. Okay, imagine that this is the initial demand curve and this is the initial supply curve, right? We get the supply curve and the demand curve, so that the equilibrium price is just P1 and the equilibrium quantity is Q1. And now what happens? The supply for pizza, if not supply of good Y, increases. When supply increases, supply curve of pizza get shifted to the right side. And as a result, what happens to the equilibrium price? Equilibrium price drops. And when equilibrium price drops, what happens to the quantity? Quantity increases. Right? Quantity increases. ඒ කියන්නේ සරලව ගත්තොත් pizza sale එක දැන් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ pizza hut එකේ. ඉතින් pizza sale එක pizza hut එකේ වැඩි වෙනකොට if you recognize that milkshakes and pizzas to be complementary goods, ඒ pizza එක මිනිස්සු ඉල්ලන milkshake එකට මොකද වෙන්නේ? pizza එකක් ගන්න ආපුගෙන pizza එක අරගෙන ටිකක් වෙලා යනකොට milkshake උත් ඕන කියලා කියනවා. එහෙනම් එතකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? milkshake demand. The demand for milkshake will increase, right? The demand for good eggs will increase. And then see what will happen in the market for milkshake. Market price increases, right? Market price increases. And what happens to the market quantity? Even the quantity increases. එහෙනම් milkshake market එකේ price එකත් වැඩි වෙලා quantity එකත් වැඩි වෙලා pizza supply එක වැඩි වුණා. මොක තමයි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? Equilibrium price has increased, so either this, if not this, equilibrium quantity has also increased, so that the answer has to be this fourth one. Right. Ninth one, the market demand for a certain product is drawn in the diagram below. Okay, we get the demand curve, and then between the prices rupees 10 and 8, the demand curve shown in the above diagram is okay. So we just need to comment on the elasticity, and that's really easy. So this is what you need to know with regard to this thing. You just tell me what happens to the price elasticity of demand when the demand curve slopes downwards from right to left. What happens to the price elasticity of demand? See, at this point, if you calculate and see the price elasticity of demand, it will be minus infinity. And at this point, it will be 0. And right in the middle, it will be minus 1. So this is what happens to PED when the demand curve slopes downwards from right to left, right? The value of PED changes from minus infinity to 0. And right in the middle, it's minus 1. And if you look at the given price range, rupees 10 and rupees 8, ඒක තියෙන්නේ මේ demand curve එකේ මැද හරිය ඉඳලා බැලුවොත් මෙන්න මේ හරිය තමයි තියෙන්නේ. එහෙනම් for PED in this given price range, PED will be a value greater than 1. If PED is a value greater than 1, elasticity, what is the elasticity type? ඒක elastic the inelastic? That will be elastic. In the product is having relatively elastic demand. So that's the answer, right? Question 9, second one is the answer. Right, look at this 10th one. It says demand and supply curves of a certain commodity sold in a competitive market are presented by the following equations. So they have given us the demand equation and the supply equation. And then they say total surplus. Okay, they ask us to calculate the total surplus. So what is this total surplus in the market? Total surplus means the total of consumer surplus and the economic surplus. Right. So if the demand curve goes as 40 minus 2p, right? That value 40 is here. This 40 divided by this 2, which is 20. So 20 is here. And if the supply curve goes as minus 40 plus 8p, minus 40 must be here. And then that minus 40 over 8, that is 5. And that 5 is here. Right? And then see what happens. This is the equilibrium price and this is the equilibrium quantity. So what's the equilibrium price? If anyone knows how to find the equilibrium price, so let me just do it quickly. So that is 10. So equilibrium price is 8. And then if it is 8, how much is the equilibrium quantity? That will be 24, right? 24 is the equilibrium quantity. So you know how to find that. Now, the total surplus, as I mentioned earlier, it is the total of this consumer's surplus and this producer's surplus. So let me first find consumer surplus. It is half into maximum demand price, which is 20, minus the market price, that is 8, into the market quantity, that is 24. So this gives you 20 minus 8 is 12. 12 into half is 6 into 24. Right, so we'll find 6 into 24. That is 144. And then producer surplus is equal to, again, half into market price, that is 8, minus the minimum supply price, that's 5, into the market quantity, that's 24. So this is, let's say 3 into 12, and that's 36. So when you get the total of the two, how much is that? That is 180. So the total surplus is 180. That's the answer. 11th. Look at the 11th question. Assume that cross price elasticity of demand between rice and bread is 3. Okay, so when you calculate this cross price elasticity, you get 3. An increase in the price of rice causes the demand for bread to raise by 75%. Okay, so the percentage change of demand, right? Percentage change of demand of, let's say, bread is 75%. And then they ask which change in price in rice has brought this about. Okay, so if you apply this, the very basic equation to calculate this CED, what's a basic equation? Percentage change of the demand of, let's say, the considered good divided by the percentage change of price of the related good, and the related good here is rice. So this is 3. Percentage change of demand of bread is 75%, and we don't know the percentage change of price of rice. So let me take it as x. So x is how much? 75% divided by 3. Answer is 25%. And what is x? That is the percentage change of price of the related good rice. එහෙනම් price එක මොකද වෙන්න ඕන? 25% වලින් වැඩි වෙන්නයි ඕන. සරලව කතා කළොත් 25% වලින් වැඩි වෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ එක කලින් 100යි නම් දැන් 125 වෙන්න ඕන. එයා කලින් 50 නම් ඒක දැන් කීයක් වෙන්න ඕනද? 25 වලින් භාගේ, that is 112.5 වෙන්න ඕනි. ඔන්න වගේ ඔය රේෂියෝ එකට ඔක වැඩි වෙන්න ඕන. ඉතින් දැන් ඔයාලා ආන්සර්ස් ටික බැලුවොත් එහෙම මම කියුනේ කලින් 100 නම් දැන් 125ක් වෙන්න ඕනි කියලා. So that is anyway visible to us here. See, if the price was previously 100, now it has changed to 125. So that itself is the answer. Again, වෙන කිසිම අමතර calculation එකක් වුණා නැහැ. Right. So answer is the 5th one. Look at the 12th one. Market equilibrium price for wheat flour is 350 per kilogram and the market equilibrium quantity is 30 million kilograms. Okay, so price is 350, Q is 30. Which of the following policies would create an excess demand of wheat flour under the situation? Okay, saralama katandare mecharai. If this is the market price, right? If 350 is the market price and if 30 is the market quantity, equilibrium quantity, and excess demand will arise in the market only if the new price is below this equilibrium price, right? Again, if the price is lower than 350, then only quantity demanded will be higher than the quantity supply. එනිසා 350 වලට වඩා අඩු price එකක් වෙන්නම ඕනි. එතකොට ඔයා උත්තර ටික බැලුවොත් 400 350 375 අනිත් ඒවා කියවන්නවත් එපා. These will never be the answer, right? Because those are above either equal to 350 or above 350. එතන ඒ වගේ situation එකක there will be an excess supply in the market, not an excess demand. excess demand එක තියෙන්නේ ඊට වඩා අඩු price එක. දැන් අඩු price එක කියලා කිව්වම we see two values. Again, two values නෙවෙයි, we have two options with lower price than 350. දැන් අපි කියවලා බලමු. Imposing a price ceiling of rupees 330 per kilogram. Imposing a price ceiling. What is a price ceiling? Maximum price. See, මං කියනර දැන් මේ price ceiling නැත්නම් maximum price කියන නිකන් මාතර බත් කඩේ වගේ තමයි. නම මාතර බත් කඩේ, හැබැයි තියෙන්නේ නුගේගොඩ. ඒ වගේ දැන් maximum price කියලා නම කිව්වට that maximum price is really lower than the equilibrium price, right? Maximum price කියලා නම කිව්වට that price is really, if it is an effective maximum price, it's really lower than the equilibrium price. And yes, this could be an effective maximum price, and if this effective maximum price is imposed in the market, right, the price will be 330. එතකොට අර මම කිව්වා වගේ QD will be higher than QS. Right, second one. So this is the answer, but we will go through the second one as well. Imposing a price floor of rupees 330 per kilogram. See, price floor. Then මෙයත් මාතරපත් කඩේ වගේ තමයි. Price floor එක minimum price. හැබැයි නම minimum වුණාට that price is really higher than the equilibrium price. එතකොට if it is a higher price, මේමයි. එකක් තමයි minimum price කියන එකට මේ දීලා තියෙන value එක ගැලපෙන්නේ නැහැ. ගැලපෙන value එකක් දුන්නා නම් that has to be somewhat higher than the 350, the current equilibrium price. එතකොට ඒක කොහොමත් වැරදි. මේ කියලා තියෙන එක කොහොමත්. Right, so answer for this 12th one is the first one. Right, look at this 13th one. In question 13, what do we get? In question 13, it says, given a downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping demand curve, a unit tax on a commodity will. Right, so we have a typical demand curve and a typical supply curve. It can upward sloping supply curve and downward sloping demand curve. So this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. A unit tax on the commodity will. Okay, the unit tax will shift the supply curve to the left side. So this is the new supply curve, and as a result, what happens to the equilibrium price? See, previous equilibrium price is here, P1, and this is, let's say, Q1. So what happens to the equilibrium price? Price increases in the market. It was a quantity decreases, right? Quantity decreases. ඔක තමයි සරලව වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඔහොම වුණාම මොකද වෙන්නේ කියලා යහන්නේ. First one says a unit tax on a commodity will raise producer surplus, and the second one says raise consumer surplus. No, imposing a unit tax reduces both of these, producer surplus and consumer surplus. Insa dekama ganna be. Third one, cause a shifting of the supply curve to the right. No, there will be a leftward shift of the supply curve, not the rightward shift. Fourth one, raise the price by more than tax. මේකත් අර මම හැමතිස්සෙම කියනවා වගේ කොහොම වෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ විතරයි. ඒ කියන්නේ සරලව ගත්තොත් එහෙම මේ අපි තමු දැන් මොබයිල් ෆෝන් එකක ප්‍රයිස් එක රුපියල් 100යි, ගවර්න්මන්ට් එක මේකට ටැක්ස් එකක්, ඒ කියන්නේ already impose කරලා තිබ්බා 12% ටැක්ස් එකක්. එතකොට 12% tax එකක් එක තමයි price becomes 100. එතකොට හවසට news වල යනවා, රැට news වල යනවා. The government is going to increase this tax from 12% to let's say 13% කියලා කියන්නේ සරලව ගත්තම tax එක වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ 2% වලින්. right? සරලව ගත්තම tax එක වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ 2% වලින්. ඊට පස්සේ ඔයා ඊළඟ දවසේ shop එකට ගිහිල්ලා අලුත් price එක අහුවොත් එහෙම ඒගොල්ලෝ price එක කියනවා නිකන් 120 වගේ. දැන් 20% increase එක තමයි මෙතන තියෙන්නේ. ඔයා අහුවම නෑ එහෙම වෙන්න බෑ මම මේ ඊයේ ඇවිල්ලා අහලා ගියා. එතකොට 100 කිව්වා. දැන් 120 කියන්න බෑ. එහෙම මොකද උනේ කියලා. ඒතර කියනවා නෑ මේකනේ ඊයේ tax එක වැඩි කළා. tax එක වැඩි කරපු නිසා price එක වැඩි වුණා කියලා. or short term මොක වෙනවා market එකේ in Sri Lankan market. හැබැයි ඒ කතන්දර වැලිඩ් නෑ මම මේක මේ ජොලියට කිව්වේ. ඒ කතන්දර වැලිඩ් නෑ in real economics. Right? In real economics what will happen? Price can increase. ඒ කියන්නේ price එක maximum වැඩි වුණොත් it can increase by the amount of the imposed tax. හරිද? maximum වැඩි වුණත් ඒක වැඩි වෙන්න පුළුවන් by the amount of the tax. එහෙම නැත්නම් 99ක් වෙලාවෙදී price will increase by an amount lower than the imposed tax. Enisa answer for this one is the fifth one, right? Answer is the fifth one. අර මම කියවනේ 99% of the time price will increase by an amount lower than the tax කියලා. එතකොට there is 1% chance for the price to increase by an amount equal to the tax. එහෙම වෙන්නේ මොන වෙලාවද? If you remember the note, right? If you have referred the note, එහෙම වෙනවා දැන් දෙකකදී එකක් තමයි if supply is perfectly, right? If supply is perfectly inelastic or if demand is perfectly elastic. In these two situations, the price increases by an amount equal to the tax. හැබැයි මෙහෙම එකක් මේ answers පහෙන් එකක තිබුණොත් මේ question එකට මේ දෙකෙන් එකක්වත් answer එක වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඇයි ඒ? මොකද question clearly tells us that we have a downward sloping demand curve and upward sloping supply curve, which means demand will never be perfectly elastic, because if demand is perfectly elastic, demand curve will be parallel to the quantity axis, which is not downward sloping. And also the question tells us that we have an upward sloping supply curve, and if supply curve is upward sloping, it's a perfectly inelastic වෙන්න බෑ, because if it is perfectly inelastic, see, this is the shape parallel to the price axis. ඔය දෙකෙන් එකක් එනං answer එක කොහොමත්ම වෙන්න බෑ මෙතන තිබුණා. ඒ නිසා from all these given options, answer is the fifth one. Right, 14th. In question 14, we get diagram above shows market demand and supply curves for corn. Okay. So this is the equilibrium price and this is the initial equilibrium quantity. Then what happens? Suppose that the government wants to introduce an effective minimum price to support corn farmers. So the government has imposed this effective minimum price. See, as we discussed, this minimum price is higher than the equilibrium price. Nama minimum munata, that price is really higher than the equilibrium price. What should the government do to maintain an effective minimum price of OP2? Okay, the minimum price is OP2 now. So in order to maintain this thing, the government has two options. Either they can purchase the excess supply, if not they can pay the deficiency amount. එතකොට මේ diagram එක ඇඳලා තියෙන විදිහෙන් අපිට තේරෙනවා that this must be referring to a situation where the government is going to purchase the excess supply. Why? Because excess supply is highlighted here. See, when the minimum price is imposed as P2, the market quantity drops to Q1. This is the quantity that is demanded by the consumer, but the supply increases to Q3. When the government ensures that there is a minimum price of P2, suppliers get motivated and they increase the supply. But this is the demand. Q1 is the demand. This is the supply. So right now in the market, we have an excess supply of this much. And this entire quantity should be purchased by the government. And what's the excess supply? Q1 to Q3. Okay, so what's the answer then? Buy the quantity Q1 to Q2. No, they have to buy the entire quantity from Q1 to Q3. And that we see in the third option. So for this question 14, third one is the answer. Right, look at the 15th one. Assume that labor is the only variable input in a certain production activity. Yes, that's what we assume when we do questions in the first chapter in Unit 4. If this firm's short-run marginal cost is increasing as output rises, which of the following must be true? Right. So look at the options given. Average product. See, they are talking about the product curves. So by looking at these options, we can understand that the relevant theory for this question is this relationship that exists between cost curves and the product curves. So what's the relationship between cost curves and the product curves? See, this is the relationship. And if this is how we get the, let's say, product curves, this is the shape of the MP curve and this is the shape of the AP curve. Meage reflection, right? Reflection of the product curves is the cost curves. So if I draw the cost curves below this, right? The reflection of the marginal product curve is the marginal cost curve. The make perfectly and so this is a marginal cost curve. And the reflection of this average product curve is the average variable cost curve, right? So the highest point at the quantity, let's say Q1, MP reaches highest, and at that same quantity, MC should reach its lowest. And at this point, let's say Q2, when the quantity is Q2, say MP crosses AP, and MC crosses AVC at the same quantity. Right. Now, look at the question one more time. If the firm's short-run marginal cost is increasing, see, marginal cost is increasing, which means they are referring to this region where marginal cost is increasing from Q1 value to, right? So they are referring to this region. So when MC is increasing, what happens to the product curves? Look at this one. Average product of labor is constant. Is it constant? This is the average product. So during this, right, part of the MC, what happens to the AP? AP is either increasing or AP is decreasing. It doesn't remain constant. It's either increasing or decreasing. So this is wrong then. Second, average product of labor is increasing. See, I told you earlier, it's either increasing or decreasing. So that we can be 100% certain about this increase or decrease. Mokada may region neke, right? It's either increasing or decreasing. So this is again not the answer there. Third one, marginal product of labor is greater than the average product of labor. Right. Look at this diagram. Now here, when MC is increasing, again, related to this region, right? That is related to this region. When MC is increasing, look at the marginal product and the average product. See, marginal product, right? In this part of the curve, marginal product is higher than the average product. True. Because the average product is somewhere here, but marginal product is somewhere here. MP is higher than AP. That's true. Right? Marginal product of labor is greater, higher than AP. Have a prashna තියෙන්නේ. It's not true to this entire region. මොකද ඔයා region එකේ මෙන්න මේ හරිය වගේ බැලුවොත් එහෙම still MC is increasing, but what happens to MP? MP is lower than AP, which is again not always true. So that you can ignore that answer as well. Right, now look at the fourth one. Marginal product of labor is decreasing. When MC is increasing, yes, true. MP is in the process of decreasing. That's true, always true. Enisa, this is the answer for this question 15. Right, fifth one, total product of labor is decreasing. See, total product of labor will decrease only when marginal product takes negative values. හැබැයි මෙතන එහෙම කතාවක් වෙන්නේ නැහැනේ. ඒ නිසා this is ignorable. දැන් මම කිව්වේ total product could be decreasing. ඒකේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. It happens only if MP is negative. හැබැයි මෙතන MP is negative ද එහෙම කතාවක් මෙතන කියන්නේ නැහැ. මෙතන කියන එකම දේ තමයි MC is increasing. We don't know what happens to MP. එතන if MC is increasing, we know one thing that MP must be decreasing. එච්චරයි අපි දන්නේ. හැබැයි ඒක decreasing කියලා කිව්වම see decreasing කිව්වම ඒක මේ range එකේ ඕන තැනක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතන අපි දන්නේ නැහැ මේ කතා කරන්නේ මොන range එකද මොන point එකද කියලා. ඒ නිසා we can't comment on the total product without knowing the exact value of MP. Right? If MP is a positive value, though it is decreasing, TP will be increasing. And if MP is 0, though it is in the process of decreasing, then total product will be maximized, reaches the highest. And if MP is a negative value while it's decreasing, then only TP is decreasing. දැන් මමම කියනවා මම මේ කියන සමහර දේවල් ඔයාට හොඳටම තේරෙන්නේ නැතුව ඇති. ඒකට හේතුව ඇත්තටම ඔයා රිෆර් කරලා නැහැ නෝට් එක. දැන් ඔයා නෝට් එක රිෆර් කරලා නම් මම ඔය කියපු ඔක්කොම ටික නෝට් එකේ තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා මේකට ආන්සර් එක බලා ගන්න විතරක් රෙකෝඩින් එකක් අහන එක තේරුමක් නැහැනේ. එහෙනම් ඔයාට පුළුවන් මාකින් එකක් අරගෙන කොයි ආන්සර් එකද හරි කියන එක බලා ගන්න. ඒතර ඔයාට තව දෙයක් ඉගෙන ගන්නනේ ඔයා මේක බලන්න ඕන. ඉතින් එතකොට මම ඔයාලට තව දේවල් ටිකක් එක්ස්ට්‍රා කියනවා. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඔයා අර නෝට්ස් එකේ ඒවා රිෆර් කරලා බලලා ඔයාටම තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන්. Right, look at the 16th one. Economic profit can be calculated as accounting profit minus which of the following? හරිම සරලයි. So how do we find this economic profit? Economic profit is equal to, you write total revenue. From the total revenue, you need to deduct both these types of costs. What are the two types of costs that you deduct? Explicit cost, and also you should deduct implicit cost. Right? Implicit cost. May dekama adu kolot you get the economic profit. But what happens if I put a bracket here? Nikang hitana that I put a bracket here. See, total revenue minus explicit cost. Now I can label this part. How do I label this part? I just label this part. I mean, the difference between total revenue and the explicit cost, I label as accounting profit. So from this accounting profit, if I subtract the implicit cost, what do I receive? I still receive the economic profit. I still receive the same thing. See, economic profit can be calculated as accounting profit minus, what's the answer? Implicit cost. So second one is the answer. Right, look at the 17th one. Which of the following costs must continuously decrease as output increases in the short term? මේවා නම් ඇත්තටම කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන්න බෑ. ඔයාලට නිකන් curves ටික මතක නම් answers එනවා. But anyway, wait, I'll show you the curves and point out the answer. Okay, now look at this note. This is the page that we require. So shape of cost curves in short run. Right. So look at this second diagram. In the second diagram, when quantity increases, what is decreasing gradually? Then may decrease will increase. May decrease will increase. Even this decreases and then again increases. But what happens to this AFC? It is decreasing gradually. So the answer has to be obviously average fixed cost. Simple as that. So we just need to find that. See, average fixed cost is here. So see what happens. AFC continuously decrease as output increases. Right. 18th question. Look at this one. At a competitive firm's current level of output, marginal cost is 100. Okay, MC is 100. Average variable cost is 60. Average fixed cost is 40. And then the product price, if it is a firm operating in a perfect competition, that has to be equal to MR and AR. So how much is that? That is also 100. Which of the following statement is true for this given firm? Okay, so just to mention this, at this level of output, MC is equal to C, MR. So that the firm must be operating in their profit maximizing point. Right? It was say, if you look at the provided answers, in all these answers, they just talk about the economic profit, whether this is zero, negative, or positive, right? There's a simple rule to decide what is the level of economic profit, and that rule is this: you need to compare price with average total cost. If price is greater than average total cost, there is a positive economic profit, right? There's a positive economic profit, and we recognize that situation as supernormal profit, right? Supernormal profit. And if P is equal to ATC, then there is zero, what do we get? Zero economic profit, and that we recognize as a situation where the firm is earning just normal profit. And if P is, right, lower than ATC, if P is lower than ATC, and to make this much more precise, the price has to be greater than AVC and lower than ATC. Now the firm is earning negative economic profit, but still they must be engaging in the production because they are receiving a price higher than their average variable cost, so that they can still cover at least a part of their fixed cost with this price that they receive. But the problem in this situation, we say that the firm is earning negative economic profit. Negative unata, they must be operating, right? And this is a situation where we recognize as super normal losses, right? This is where the firm earns supernormal losses. Right. Now think about the ATC, because most of these are based on ATC. So think about the ATC value in this question. ATC is equal to AFC plus AVC. So AFC is 40, AVC is 60, so that ATC is 100. And ATC is same as the price, which means what's the relevant rule then? This. If ATC is equal to price, they are earning zero economic profit, if not normal profit. That's the answer there. Right. So come back to this and look at this one. Economic profits are zero because price is equal to average total cost 100% too. That itself is the answer. So no point of going through the other options there. Right. Now we will move to 19. Which of the following describes the typical business cycle in the correct sequence? Okay, just think about the business cycle now, right? Okay, so here we recognize this to be the peak, and then we have recession, bottom or trough, which word they have used here? Trough. Okay, so it's trough, and then again we have expansion, and then we have peak. So this is what get continued. Okay, so expansion, we'll start with expansion. Okay, so if it is the expansion, the second one has to be, see, expansion, second one has to be the peak. No, what is this? Growth? No, there's nothing called growth. Again, growth shape expansion tamai. So that's wrong there. Expansion, yeah. Then we have peak, and after peak, what do we get? Recession, correct. And after recession, what do we get? Trough. 100% true. So second one is the answer for this question, 90. Right, 20th. Which of the following would be classified as consumption expenditure when calculating gross domestic product? Consumption expenditure. Okay. First one, purchase of wheat flour by a baker to make bread. Wheat flour by a baker. Again, this baker is just purchasing raw materials. Then Godakada may matakane raw materials. Right? Raw materials is a part of capital. Raw materials is a part of capital. So we have different forms of capital: fixed capital, circulating capital, social overhead capital. So raw materials belong to circulating capital. So inside circulating capital, we get all these three: raw materials, goods being produced, and finished goods. Whatever this purchase that this baker makes belongs to an investment expenditure, not consumption expenditure. So this is wrong there because the question asks us to recognize one example for consumption expenditure. Purchase of a new computer software. See, again, this is also a part of capital. So this is also investment expenditure, not a part of consumption expenditure. Donating. So donating, we don't even consider those donations. We just consider them as transfers and we ignore them when evaluating GDP. So ignorable. Purchasing 1,000 shares. See, this is a financial transaction. Again, we ignore this. The consumption, the consider Fifth one, spending 3,000 for having dinner at a restaurant. Yes, true. This is the answer, right? This is the example for consumption expenditure. 21. It says, suppose a wealthy person bought the holiday home in Nugegoda, which he used to rent every year. Okay, due to this transaction. Again, මෙයා හැමදාම ඉතින් අවුරුද්දට ගියාම එතන තමයි ඉන්නේ. මෙයාට ආසයි තියලා he's just buying this thing now. Which means this is a transaction of used goods. This is a sale of used goods. මොකද එයා හැම අවුරුද්ද මෙතන හිටියා නම් that has already been built නේ. So he's purchasing the already built house. So it falls under sale of used goods, and we don't consider these. We simply ignore these sale of used goods when calculating the GDP of a country. Enisa GDP decrease වෙන්නෙත් නැහැ, GDP increase වෙන්නෙත් නැහැ. Third one says GDP is unaffected because it is a second-hand sale. Yes, that is the answer. So answer is very clear, so no need to go through the other options there. 22. In a given year, nominal GDP is 1,200, real GDP is 1,000, then the GDP deflator. So what is this GDP deflator? I hope that you all remember there's a small equation to calculate this GDP deflator. Right? What is that? That is simply nominal GDP over real GDP multiplied by 100. So nominal GDP is 1,200, real GDP is 1,000 multiplied by 100 gives us 120. So answer is 120. Simple. Right. 23. Table below shows some macroeconomic data for a certain economy. We get the gross domestic capital formation, which is investment, exports of goods and non-factor services, which is simply, let's say, exports, imports of goods and non-factor services, which is simply imports, and then government savings, right? Government savings, that's -3. And what do they ask us to calculate? Value of private savings in the economy is, okay, since this is with regard to all these investment, savings, exports, imports, we can apply this simple equation. Injections must be equal to withdrawals at the macroeconomic equilibrium. So we can write, what are the injections? Investments, government purchases, exports must be equal to savings, taxes, and imports. So for investments, we get 50, and we don't have any value for government purchases. Exports is 10. So this must be equal to savings. That is how much? That's what we need to actually find. So we will first find the total savings. Savings plus tax, that's not given, so 0. Imports, that's 16. So from this side, we get 60 equals savings plus 16. So how much is savings? Savings equals 16 minus 16, which is 44. So this is the total amount of savings. And we know that this total savings, right, we received mainly under two components. So on one side, we have government savings, right? Government savings. And then we have private savings. So based on this thing, we can develop a simple equation to calculate total savings. So we write, according to the question, we write government savings plus private savings, right? And in the question, the requirement is to calculate the private savings so that the total savings we found to be 44. Then government savings is given to us as -3. Here it's -3. We write -3 plus private savings. And what happens when you take this -3 to this side to subject private savings from this equation, it becomes +3, so that the total of private savings has to be 47. So that's the answer for this question 23, right? 47, it is in the first one. Right, now look at the question 24. There it says, suppose that in a certain economy, when the aggregate income increases from 500 million to 1000 million, okay, so the aggregate income Y increases from 500 million to 1000 million. Aggregate consumption expenditure increases from 800 to 1200. So consumption increases from 800 to 1200. And the requirement is values of autonomous consumption, which is this component A in the consumption equation, and the marginal propensity to consume, that is this component B in the consumption equation. So from these two components, we can first find the value of B based on this data in the question. So you write B, if not marginal propensity to consumption, is equal to, you write delta C over delta YD. But according to this question, we need to assume that YD and Y both are same. So delta C is the change of consumption, which is 400. Delta YD or delta Y is 500. So based on 400 and 500, we get the value as 0.8. So that's the value of B, if not marginal propensity to consume. And to find this value of A, you can use this consumption function. So C is equal to, let me use a different color pen. C is equal to A plus B into YD. So C, you can just pick one of these C values. So let me pick 800. C is equal to A plus B we found to be 0.8 into YD. So in this case, Y and YD must be same because we don't have any data related to transfers and taxes. So that both must be same. Then when the consumption is 800, income is 500. So you get 800 equals A plus 400. So that the value of A is simply 800 minus 400. So that is also 400. Right, now we found the value of A, that's 400, and the value of B is 0.8. So come to this table. A is 400, it's here, and then B is 0.8. So answer is the second one. Right, now look at this question 25. Assume that the marginal propensity to consume in a certain economy is 0.8. All right, so we write MPC is 0.8. Equilibrium real GDP, which is Y, falls short of full employment real gross domestic product by 1000 billion. So simply this 1000 we can recognize to be the fall. If not, this is the difference. This is the change that has happened in the aggregate income. So that has decreased by 1000. What is the amount by which the government should increase its purchases? Government purchases to raise economy's real gross domestic product to reach the full employment income level. Okay, to reach the full employment income level, the government needs to increase its income by 1000. So look at the given data. We get MPC, then we get the change of the equilibrium income. So based on this, you can decide that you can find this answer based on the autonomous expenditure multiplier. So you can write change of the national income is equal to multiplier times. According to this, they are going to change the government purchases. So multiplier times the change in government purchases. So the desired change in income is 1000. And based on this MPC, we can find the multiplier. So K is equal to 1 over 1 minus MPC. So it's 1 over 1 minus 0.8. That's 1 over 0.2. So that the answer is 5. So if it is 5, right, you can take that 5 here, and now you can subject delta G from this equation. So delta G has to be how much then? 1000 divided by 5, that is just 200. So what does this tell you? This tells you that if the government purchases are increased by 200, right, we will be able to increase the national income by 1000, so that we can again reach to this full employment real gross domestic product. So answer has to be the second one.